Good evening. I'm Eugene Chan with Straight Talk. Our guest tonight is Dr. Stephen Wong Yun San, a public policy, financial and economic analyst. He is the executive director of the Public Policy Institute of our Hong Kong Foundation. Dr. Wong is also a legislative councillor and was the deputy director of Mr. John Lee's campaign team that prepared our new chief executive's manifesto. So tonight, he is here to tell us what results we can expect from the new administration to deliver. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you, Eugene.
Right, so Mr. John Lee has been sworn in last week, and we are very honored to have President Xi coming all the way from Beijing to officiate this and to celebrate with us our auspicious 25 years of hand after unification with the motherland. He described Hong Kong as having risen from the ashes from all the challenges we had over the last few years. And he also enunciated 4 principles for Hong Kong to adhere to and expressed 4 hopes for us. So being in the campaign office, you know more than most people in Hong Kong what his manifesto is all about. How does Mr. John Lee's manifesto match up to the 4 principles and the 4 hopes that President Xi had expressly expressed to the whole world?
First of all, Eugene, despite all the titles that you mentioned, I'm in my own personal capacity to talk about in this show. So it's my own personal views. Second, it's yes, I think President Xi, if you looked at, first of all, obviously, I support John's manifesto and look forward to him delivering those manifestos. I think John is a great leader, and I think he assembled a good team, a very capable team that are able actually to deliver results. So very look forward to that. And if you look at, obviously, looking back at President Xi's manifesto, so I brought it here today, the Chinese and the English version, I think there are a lot in it. As you said, the 4 must and the 4 wishes. If I look at the 4 must, I would say those are providing from a policy researcher perspective, I think the 4 must provide us a stable framework for us to deliver results. Right? So it's basically giving you a solid, stable foundation. Now, the 4 hopes are obviously more forward-looking. And if you look in detail about the 4 hopes, I would classify this. He is not asking for more of the same. More is important, more public goods, more housing, more services, it's faster, for example. But also there are a lot of things that he mentioned in there that is asking for not just more of the same, but actually be more strategic.
Right.
And he talks about reform. He talks about active, prudent reform. And he basically talks about outcome. Right? So he's asking for more strategic view that is outcome-driven with reform. So he's not looking for more of the same. He's looking for more strategic and potentially some active, prudent reform to our system to deliver results. So I think that is obviously a higher hopes than what, and I think it takes a lot of effort to actually deliver that hopes.
Right. As you rightly mentioned, I think President Xi gave a very over 30-minute speech, and it's very full of content. Yeah. And one message that I receive, I was going to ask you for your opinion, is he has categorically said that one country system is the best system for Hong Kong and for the motherland, and is here to stay. I think that has answered a lot of queries that raised from the public. But from Mr. John Lee's perspective, he mentioned he's going to be result-oriented, he's going to be pragmatic. So how is he, what does those 2 words mean exactly? How is he going to deliver on to President Xi's hopes and principles?
So, one thing that, again, as if you look at the first hope, talks about striving to improve the governance, in which I want to highlight this. He talks about the sense of national identity and a global vision to be highlighted, and plans for Hong Kong development should be made with overall and long-term requirements in mind, right? So we chit-chat before the camera. We always identify one of the problems with the previous administrations that because of the political landscape, because of a lot of things, we tend not to plan for the long term, right? So we basically usually deal with sort of the short-term fixes.
We had a lot of burning issues, haven't we?
Yeah, we have a lot of burning issues. The machine is not rolling along, so we tend to just focus on the low-hanging fruits. But what he is talking about, at least for the first hope, is that he's looking for long-term requirement, long-term planning. He talks about the plan for Hong Kong development with overall, which is strategic and holistic,
right,
and long-term. So, for example, if we talk about Northern Metropolis, right? So obviously that is a long-term game plan, but he's not talking about Northern Metropolis. Frankly, in the past administration, it's more of a concept. Right? It's a concept. We draw up in the map. We sort of have this concept, but what is the strategic goal, and what is the strategic aim, and what is the strategic delivery? Right? We talked about, okay, so we want to have jobs, high-paid jobs created in Northern Metropolis, but how do we actually deliver that? So I think these are sort of the long-term planning that is yet to be done and needs to really have to, pencil down and have a long-term strategic mindset.
Right, Stephen, since you mentioned, we had a lot of challenging years. The last few years, burning issues are the word to use, so they can't do much for long-term planning. In a recent interview, Mr. John Lee said, my team and I will reach out, listen to, and communicate with the public with sincerity. We will be proactive in winning the trust of the people, making sure policy that you just mentioned that meets with the demands. It's very encouraging promise.
Yeah.
But what is it going to take for the new administration to be able to win back public's interest? I'm not saying that they don't trust the government, but a lot of people rely on themselves more, to be honest. We had a few shows, we had a lot of issues in Hong Kong, and Mr. John Lee's coming on, it's like a bit of fresh air. It all sounded very promising, but what will, from your point of view to see, how is he going to win back people's trust?
I think, first of all, presidency did set a pretty, good tone. He talks about Hong Kong as a common home for all its people, and harmonious families will always prosper, right? So I think this concept of harmonious family is, as Hong Kong as a harmonious family is what we need to strive for. I think, hopefully, where we can, first of all, is engagement. For example, when we do policy dialogues, hopefully, there are obviously more public engagement, but with an end goal in mind, right? So previously, we have done a lot of engagement, especially for massive projects like Lantau Tomorrow. It's already sort of been discussed for at least 10 years. So that has, that received public mandates over and over again, but yet, it seems to not going anywhere, meaning that it's still sort of, wanting to be discussed again. So I think, it's good to have engagement, but I think it needs to have some professional judgment, and so that you can move along the process with, professional judgment with, after you have got, a public mandate to really go forward and execute. So I think, as you said, I'm of high hope of John's execution with his team. But one thing I want to mention is that in order to have a long-term strategic game plan, I think they need to work closely with the relevant think tanks under, or the research unit under the various central government. Right? In the central government, they have, under the State Council, for example, they have research unit. And under the, for example, the Communist Party, within the Communist Party, they also have a research unit, that each of these units, and also obviously the Hong Kong Macau office, right, and as well as the liaison office, each of them has different research units. I think that needs to work closely with the research unit within the government to actually come up with long-term strategic plan, right? Because if our future in Hong Kong is of a national integration, meaning that we need to have a one country, two system, but we need to be aligned with a strategic national goal so that we can find a bigger platform for Hong Kong to develop as a national unique crown jewel within the national strategy facing the international world. I think that is what President Xi mentioned, right? But in order to actually deliver that, meaning that we need to have a unique role within the national framework facing the international world, we need to align ourselves from a policy research and strategic game plan perspective with the central research unit within the various national departments. So I think that's something that is of very important.
Right, Stephen, before we go to a break, one comment that I'm going to ask you when we come back is that apart from one country, two systems, the presidency has vowed to say it's going to stay. And I think it's Hong Kong maintains Hong Kong unique strength and weakness, the status and the strength, meaning that we're going to maintain the international financial center. We're going to have a free and open business environment. The common law system is going to stay. And most importantly, smooth and convenient linkages to the rest of the world. We will talk about that when we come back from the break. Sure. Let's take a break. Welcome back. With us tonight is Dr. Stephen Wong, and we have been talking about what we can expect from our new CE's manifesto. So Stephen, just before the break, I asked you a question of how John is going to fight, especially the fear-mongering from especially the West amongst Hong Kong, saying that the one country, two systems in Hong Kong, the two systems basically gone, one country, one system, and Hong Kong is no longer an international important place. But President Xi's visit has reiterated one country, two systems is going to stay, and Hong Kong will maintain our connection with the rest of the world. So is this going to help Mr. John Lee's work in the upcoming months in getting the trust from not only Hong Kong people, but from the rest of the world?
Yeah, I think there's important, yes, the answer is definitely yes. And the second is that it's definitely important for the new administration, which they are doing, as discussed in the manifesto, that we need to sort of go out and, as a whole government approach, to talk about the China story as well as the Hong Kong story, that reflect the reality that we are open for business. Despite the pandemic, obviously social distancing measures and all these things that we might or might not have time to discuss, but I think we need to, this message of open for business, for international business, it needs to be pretty much there. But I also wanted to answer your last question in the last session about the finance center. Obviously, after if we are open for business, I'm very confident the International Financial Center in Hong Kong will continue to be strengthened.
Despite all the talent drain that we had in the last few months?
I think there are structural advantages of Hong Kong being the financial center that will create more business opportunities that will attract jobs to make a career here. The structural advantages that I mentioned is obviously because of the growth of the China economy.
Stephen, I also want to ask you, Mr. John Lee's team, he mentioned the word teamwork. And you now have new bold thinking, think out of the box, but it's essentially the same 180,000 civil service team. Many of the issues we have are still there. So do you think Mr. Lee, although he had great hopes to solve the problem, and together is what he also used to get a unity from the society supporting him, will he do it? Can he do it?
A very good question. I think leadership is important, and he has, as I said, I think John is a good leader, and I think he also has a sample of capable teams. So these are the teams is also in itself, all of them are leaders. So I think I'm very confident about their leadership. Now, but I also wanted to talk about this. Not the first part we talked about, not business as usual, meaning that there are active reform that need to be done. Now, reform is meaning that you have a team, but you actually need to have a reform mindset of. For example, give you an example, right? In Xi's, she talked about the second hope. The national strategies, we need to sort of align ourselves with the 14 five-year plan, right? The GBA opportunities and Belt and Road cooperation.
Yes.
Right? So now, for GBA, talks about that for 5 years already, right? So have we seen actual result
not apparent.
Not a lot. There are a lot of talks, right? So obviously this pandemic also dragged back a little bit. But really, in order to actually have a GBA that to be delivered, we need to have a more collaborative reform together with our neighbors. For example, Shenzhen. For example, the Loop, right? When we talk about GBA, let's focus on a specific area that is, very small and defined area.
But Stephen, what you said is so true. But also, as I was talking, I'm thinking about, you say he's got a good team. I totally agree. This government has three new deputy secretaries, 2 new bureaus, and one article said they have over 50 more civil service servants. So there are even more people than before. Do you think even with a good leader, can he coordinate with even a bigger team, and even the power can be transferred to everybody so that everybody can get up, roll up the sleeves and get things done? What do you think?
Yeah, as I said, I think the leadership is important. I think what I said is you need, in order to change the way of doing things, yes, you can change the culture, you can change the cut the red tape, what they've been talking about. But I think importantly is the reform mindset. The reform mindset, not just within the government, but also with our neighbors. We need to be actively working with, for example, as a policy researcher, I work together with a lot of think tanks in Shenzhen and Guangdong.
Right.
Sometimes some of the think tanks are actually government under the ministry or under the departments. Some of them are social think tanks, right, like us. So I think these sort of, when you work with think tanks, we tend to have a bit more policy innovations, right? We think about out of the box, right, which is the thing about driving the reform. So I think, yes, you need to have a team, you need to have, change the culture, but I think importantly, you also need to have new policy mindset that is collaborative in nature.
Yeah, one very important thing that even in the 14th five-year plan is developing Hong Kong as an innovation and technology hub. In the last few years, as you said, GBA, we talk about like 5 years, even IT, we have an IT bureau for 2 governments, but Hong Kong never been very conducive to such sort of development. And do we have such an ecosystem for this to develop? Very short answer.
Short answer is, we don't have the end goals, right? For example, Shenzhen, they said that for biotech, they want by 2025, they want to have 200 billion GDP equivalent of actual business to be generated out of that. 200 billion by 2025. Singapore, 5% of the GDP is already from biotech. So what is the percentage of GDP that we want our biotech to become? I mentioned biotech because it's one of the 2 high-tech new business that the government identified together with AI, for example. But what is the GDP target for that? If you talk about 5%, that is equivalent of actually having extra GDP from biotech by additional, 150 billion every year. So how do we get there? I think that those are hard questions that need to have a strategic policy game plan in order to address that.
Right, President Xi said, give us the impression the central government is going to give us staunch support in that area. Do we have enough talent pool in Hong Kong, our mindset, to make this happen? Very simple.
As I said, it's not simple. I can't give you a simple answer because you're talking about ecosystem.
Right.
You need to change the ecosystem to attract talent. So how do you change the ecosystem?
So that would take time.
No, not just time. What I'm talking about is reform.
Reform.
Is reform. How do you reform? If the business can happen in Shangshui, right now is within Northern Metropolis, can Shangshui become a high-tech hub? Why not, right?
Why not?
You need to build an ecosystem. In order to build an ecosystem, you need to leverage on the neighbor, Shenzhen, where they actually have a supply chain. So we need to have an integrative supply chain that is of high-tech in nature. But how do you do that? That's policy innovations. How do you do that? How do you have policy innovations? That is working together with the policy people in Shenzhen, in Guangdong, in order to actually generate that ecosystem in Hong Kong.
Right, Stephen. Another issue that, let's move on to another area that Hong Kong people are very concerned about, housing and land shortage supply. I mean, this is even mentioned by President Xi. And John has mentioned in the manifesto, he had new 2 groups of people looking at the land development, housing, making sure things are moving faster. Now, Hong Kong grassroots, they have to wait for up to longer time, like 6 years, to get into public housing. And for the younger generation, it takes them forever to get on the ladder for increasing private housing. Are you confident in the next few years we will see some results?
Again, without reform, it's hard, right? We can have a little bit faster because in order to shorten the waiting time from 6 years to shorten it by let's say half year or 1 year, you need to build every year for the next 5 years. Let's say we already plan to build 20,000 public houses every year for the next 5 years. We need to actually build, let's say, 5,000 or even 10,000 more every year, completions. So in order to have completions, additional 10,000 completions every year, you need to actually increase the construction speed. It's not about finding land. It's not about actually converting the land into planned, usable land. It's actually about having a usable land and building on top of that, because right now the building cycle in itself is around 5 years, right? So you need to shorten that building cycle so that you can increase the completion. But how do you actually shorten the building cycle? It's not just about getting a new contractor, getting someone to work faster. No, it's actually cutting a lot of red tapes within the construction area, within the housing department, so that we can have more delivery.
Right. Stephen, like all the chief executives, at least for the last 2 terms, Mr. Leung and Mrs. Lam, they both treated housing as the most important issue. But right today, the results are still far from satisfaction. So do you think with Mr. John Lee's determination and the teamwork that you said, and the reform that hopefully we will see, and with central government support with all the different things we do, are you confident we will fix the problem, or it's going to take a few years? What will be your short answer to that?
The short answer is I think we're on the right track. I think also the speed will be increased. The question is obviously whether we can increase more the speed. We can increase the long-term the results. Having Northern Metropolis and Lantau tomorrow. But my concern, as I told you about, is it's not just about the land. It's not just about the units. It's also about can you create jobs in those new areas, and what are the plans for doing that? Right.
With his new style of leadership, he's a very people's person. He's there for unite the team, and actually he said in the program recently that if there's a problem, he'll be taking responsibility, or he takes ownership of it. So do you think this is the style that we've been looking for to lead us for the next important 5 years we have?
As I said, I think John is a good leader. I think it is important to get a strong team that actually can deliver results for him. I think one thing that again, if presidency set a high bar with his 4 hopes, and this high bar, as I said, is not just about doing business as usual, but it has active, prudent reform.
All right.
That needs to work closely with the national team.
Right. That's all the time we have, Stephen. Yeah. We must take you up here one more time to deliver all the plans. So thank you for coming to share with us what you think Hong Kong people shall expect from our Chief Executive, John Lee, to deliver. We look forward to a detailed action plan after Mr. Lee's first 100 days in office with his pragmatic and result-oriented approach. Have a good week and good night.